Hi, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about the microscopic structure of compact bone tissue. Quickly, I wanted to take a minute to review what we've already learned about spongy bone and compact bone. We already know that spongy bone you can find primarily in the epiphyses of long bones. It makes up the majority of the bone tissue at the epiphysis of a long bone. And we also know that you find spongy bone making up the majority of the tissue found in flat bones, short bones, and irregularly shaped bones. You may remember short bones are the bones in your wrists and your ankles. Flat bones are bones like ribs and the bones of the cranium, and then your irregularly shaped bones are bones like your scapula and your vertebrae. Spongy bone is, as the name implies, full of lots of little holes, and so that makes spongy bone lighter than compact bone, and those holes serve to support and protect the red bone marrow. Now, the spongy bone structure is made up of what we call trabeculae, and these are little thin plates of bone material. And the great thing about spongy bone is all those little holes can be filled with red bone marrow. And as you remember, red bone marrow is very important because it's what actually generates all the blood cells for your body. Now let's turn our attention to compact bone, which is actually going to be what we talk about for the majority of this podcast today. Compact bone is found in a thin layer surrounding the outside of all bones. Particularly, we were talking about long bones before, and then you find compact bone making up the majority of the bone tissue along the diaphysis of the long bones, the shaft. Compact bone is, as its name implied, very densely packed. It's compact, like a compact car. Everybody's squished in really close. So there's not many spaces. There's not really any place to store anything inside the compact bone tissue itself. And compact bone is, again, on that outer layer. So it's just deep to the periosteum, which is the membrane surrounding the outside of a bone that serves to protect the bone tissue. What I'd like for you to do is to take a second and complete this T-chart. You can pause this podcast while you do that. We're going to go over this tomorrow in class. Jot down some on the left-hand side, some characteristics that are specific only to compact bone. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to jot down characteristics that are specific only to spongy bone. And then down along the bottom of that diagram, I would like you to write down some characteristics that compact bone and spongy bone have in common. Okay, now that you're done with that, let's go ahead and start talking about the objectives we're going to cover today. Today we're talking about microscopic structures that make up bone tissue, specifically compact bone tissue. And we're going to talk not only, as usual in anatomy and physiology, we talk about the anatomy, which are the structures, and then physiology, which is what are the functions of those structures. The first thing you need to know about compact bone is the basic functional unit is called an osteon. Okay, and if you look in this diagram down below, you can see I have a microscope slide on the right-hand side and the artist's rendering from your textbook on the left-hand side. And you can see these repeating ring structures. They look like tree rings to me. These are the osteons. So each set of circles would be one osteon. And you can see in the artist's rendering, they've kind of pulled one osteon up out of the diagram. So you can see specifically what the whole unit looks like. Osteons are also sometimes called haversian systems, but you'll hear me call them osteons. In an osteon, one of the major features that you can see is the central canal. The central canal is conveniently located in the center of the osteon. The central canal serves a purpose of making a space for blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels to travel through the structure of your skeleton. As you remember, skeletal tissue is alive, so it needs a constant supply of oxygen and it needs to have wastes removed. Okay, so this is where those vessels will travel. And I have placed some arrows to show you all the central canals, well, most of the central canals. You can see the microscopic slide, the same one from the last slide down on the right-hand corner. There's a second microscope view. The yellowish one is from your book. And then I found a different artist's rendering for you to take a look at. And I like that one because it has the different structures inside the central canal. So you can see really how it serves its purpose. The layers that form those tree rings in the osteon are called concentric lamellae. Now, the word concentric you may remember from a math class. It means circles that share the same center. So indeed, these lamellae, these layers, do share the same center, that is the central canal. And this is bone matrix that has been laid down. Now, bone matrix is made up of inorganic salts, some hydroxyapatite, some calcium carbonate, and of course, collagen fibers. When you look at this bone matrix with just your naked eye macroscopically, you see it as that hard white material that bones are made out of. So the concentric lamellae make up the bulk of compact bone tissue. Most of compact bone tissue is going to be these concentric lamellae. So they are most of the osteon as well. The next structure we have is called a lacunae, and lacuna or lacunae, it actually means lake. So these are the little openings you see in between the concentric lamellae. You can see the diagram down at the bottom. I have a few of them circled for you. They actually are kind of like a lake because inside of the lacuna is the osteocyte, and osteocyte is a mature bone cell. The mature bone cells actually make the bone matrix, and they wind up trapping themselves inside of these little lacunae. So since cells are mostly water, it is actually kind of like a little lake. The osteocytes are responsible for the daily metabolic function of bone, so they're who's taking care of business, making sure that the cellular products that bone needs get made, okay, making sure to process the nutrients for the cells, etc., making sure that your bone tissue is healthy. Oh, down there is a little osteocyte. I forgot I brought him in there. Just to give you an idea of what an osteocyte actually looks like. It kind of looks kind of like a crazy spider, but that's the little guy that lives inside the lacuna. Our next structure is the canaliculi, or if you're talking about just one at a time, canaliculus. These are the little, essentially they're little canals. They are radiating off of the little lacunae. You can see them in the diagram. I've shown you a really close-up artist's rendering in the center there, and you can see the osteocyte residing inside of the lacuna. Then to the left, you can see a similar drawing to the one we were looking at before, where the osteocyte is inside, but you can actually see how the little canaliculi are radiating off of the lacuna, and they're actually connecting to one another so that the fluids that those cells are bathed in have a place to travel back and forth. That fluid will be carrying the oxygen and dissolved nutrients to those cells so that they can remain healthy. Over on the right-hand side, you have the microscopic slide, and in that picture, the canaliculi, they just look kind of like little tiny scratches. They are teeny, teeny, tiny little structures. All right, our fifth structure are called perforating canals or Volkmann's canals. I prefer to call them perforating canals because I think it's a really good description of what they do. They actually penetrate transversely toward the center of a bone. And much like the central canal, these carry blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatics. They actually will penetrate ultimately all the way through to the medullary cavity in the center of the bone from the periosteum. And of course, they're going to coincide with the central canals as well, because that's where you have your blood vessels branching off of. So you can see the perforating canals in both of these diagrams. Okay, it's time to take another little sweat break, and you can take your diagram that I've provided for you, and I would like you to choose one color to highlight the central canals on your diagram, and choose a second color to highlight the Volkmann's canals for me on that diagram. And again, we'll be checking those in class tomorrow. Go ahead and pause the video while you complete that little activity. The next thing I'd like you to do is to take this diagram. This is the diagram from your book. It already has the leader lines for you. I'd like you to create a diagram that you can use to study. So instead of writing out the names of each structure, I'd like you to give them a letter. You have the key on the screen here. So where you see compact bone tissue, you're going to label that letter A so that you can go back and study later and you can say, oh, what was A? Oh, yeah, that looks like compact bone tissue. I can see the osteons there. So I will give you, again, go ahead and pause the video for another minute or so while you complete this. Okay, the last thing I thought you might like to do is to take a look at those bone cells doing what they do. You're going to see the osteoclasts, the osteocytes, the osteoblasts, and the osteogenic cells, I think, even make an appearance in this video, just to kind of get an idea. We haven't approached the homeostasis of calcium in bone yet, but we're getting really close now that we know about the bone cells. We're just about ready to talk about that topic. So it might behoove you to take a look at this video. It's pretty short, and the narrator explains what's going on as it's going through. Go ahead and create either physical flashcards of the vocabulary terms you've learned today, or you can go ahead and make a Quizlet or some digital flashcards to help you study. Remember, you've got 15 minutes a day devoted to studying your anatomy vocabulary in order to be as successful as you possibly can be. I look forward to seeing you in class tomorrow. Thanks for viewing my podcast. Have a great afternoon or evening.